There we go. Started. Nice. So, as yesterday I showed you the new feature. It's a part of a business profile where you actually can be added as a bike shop and you can hire a mechanic on demand. So, what do you think about it?
I mean, I think it's a great idea because a lot of times my shop is really seasonal, and also finding skilled mechanics in the area that are available when things are busy is not easy. And I'm looking for a solution for that, and I see Velotooler as that solution, especially for shops that are like mine, that are in an area where it's busy 3 or 4 months a year, and then it's really quiet.
Okay, you've seen the option where you can just basically schedule someone for a particular a day in advance, and you can basically do it routinely every Friday. You can have somebody for a couple hours, maybe a half day or a full day. How does it work in terms of your billing? Like, well, right now, like you told me that you've been doing it a little bit, and what's your experience? You know, like just having someone coming in every time. But without Velotooler, I mean, is there a trouble with that, or in terms of a business perspective, running a business?
I think the shop is going to need to do something similar to what I'm doing, which is you group work more or less based around when you have somebody to do it rather than just accepting all work as it comes in. I think customers are becoming more and more accepting of the idea that your repair is going to be due on a day that we have a person who's got the skill set to do that. In terms of hiring the mechanic and paying them, I mean that stuff is pretty standard. If I have somebody that's on my normal payroll, then I have them scheduled for a particular day. My issue with that sometimes is I don't have a backup person if they can't make it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they have lives outside of my shop. So having additional choices for somebody to come in and do work is kind of important to me. And I also know that if I can schedule work for an employee for a particular day, I can also know for a fact that I'm going to make a profit when that employee comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to make sure that I'm not hiring somebody and then paying them $100 to do $50 worth of work.
Mm-hmm. So potentially, I mean, you be okay with not just individual mechanic coming to you, but maybe some mobile bike service. Like there's people driving the vans, and like even like a franchise as a Velofix as well. I mean, if you really slammed with work and you have so much work to do a particular day, I mean, you can just basically hire someone on demand, right?
Yeah, and I'm thrilled. I mean, having an on-demand workforce in the way the economy works now, to me, is a critical development. Like as time goes on, it's very apparent that my customer schedules are really busy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just no way to adjust workforce schedules to make that a reliable service for the customer. I can't give them what they expect with a traditional bike shop employee relationship.
Mm-hmm. And how about the pricing? Would you be okay paying a bit of a premium on hiring a mechanic on demand? Because obviously it's not going to be any more of $12, $13, $15 per hour. It's going to be a little bit more. It's like $25 per hour. Would you be okay with that? I mean,
Yeah, because I guess in my opinion is where are you spending your money? And there's a lot of times my feeling is that the real trade with an employee is that you're trading time for dollars. So you're telling the employee, I'm like, oh, you're going to work from X to X, and then my job as a business owner is to create enough work so that when they do come, that they have work and there produces a profit, and that we can maintain that relationship. I think paying more money with guaranteed sales on my end makes more sense than hiring somebody at a lower rate and then potentially losing money some days and making money others. I mean, the employee is not just a tool to be used. I mean, I'd rather pay them more money and come in only when I have work for them than have them stand around and be idle, because I have not met one person who enjoys that.
That makes sense. And how about from efficiency from that point of view? Like, do you think that having someone coming in for a particular Ford, like a full day of work where there's basically 20 bikes need to be tuned up and, you know, 5 bike assembly, do you think that's so like filling that gap of like where you just have like a somebody coming in every day during the week, but there's not really enough jobs, and you asking them to basically sweep the floor or, you know, run the errands, something like that, but like where you kind of have all the work pulled together, and they just basically come in all the tools and just, you know, the people are being efficient, but in a way, but at the same time, like those people, mechanics, and I wouldn't say people, but would you find this more rewardable? Like, for example, if you worked as a mechanic for a long time, do you like when there's a lot of work pile up and you just basically enjoying you moving from one work to another, one bike to another? I mean, is that something that like you would like as a mechanic? I know it's a little bit different question, but just in general. Because it's kind of like, so for example, if I'm a painter and a builder, there's more work to do. I feel like, well, there's a lot of work, so I'm feeling tired. But from a mechanical point of view, like you have like a organized labor, organized bikes to do, and there's basically a little bit of a, you know, break between them. Do you think that's putting a lot of pressure on mechanic, or?
I mean, there's certainly going to be some pressure that there's scheduled work, but at the same time, being not knowing what your next task is going to be, you know, I think is not necessarily a good feeling for most mechanics. I mean, to come in and know that you're going to go to work today and anything could be there, you know. I mean, so yeah, it's a slow day, and you know, maybe you're taking out the trash or you're doing some other work that the store couldn't get done at other parts of the week. I definitely do that when I have somebody that works for me, like on an hourly basis. But if I have somebody that I have scheduled, you know, like I have, you know, an employee who can only come in on Friday. So I schedule my work for Friday for him, and he comes in and he has a full day of tasks ahead of him, and he doesn't have necessarily like downtime. I mean, he has time in between those scheduled repairs that are there, but he isn't necessarily going to be filled up with busy work that is maybe outside of the skills that he's developed.
Yeah, but do you think that's relationship? Would that be sort of like kind of, it's because it wouldn't be the same as having like a full-time employee. You have like developed this relationship with the person, and you know that there's a time for a joke or something like that. It's this with on-demand mechanic puts on-demand mechanic and a bike shop owner with like this little bit of a miscommunication. Like there's a work, you come and do it. Is because is going to be okay with you? Because
I personally, I that's what I want. You know, I mean, as much as I'd like to have a social relationship with people, a lot of times I'm really focused on the overall business, and you know, if there's time for conversation, I'll certainly use it. But at the same time, when I'm trying to make the mortgage on the building and pay the other bills, you know, there's other responsibilities I have to look at, and I need people that see it the same way.
okay, that sounds like sounds like a great idea to have a Velotooler mechanic come into you, and because you just basically really does make a difference from a business perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the past, you know, as a mechanic, you know, seeing where you fit into, you know, the overall picture of a bike shop, you know, a shop can easily send conflicting, you know, information to the employee. You know, like, yes, we value you for your skill, but it's really slow today. So instead of doing the skill that you're good at, we're going to have you do some other thing that maybe you don't even care about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as a mechanic, you know, you may have some interests outside of doing mechanical work, but those might not include, you know, some of the tasks that have to be done in a store. And I'd much rather have a skilled mechanic come in and have work that they were good at, you know, and have them do that, and then they can go on to do whatever it is that they do when they're not here. You know, I think that it's very easy to be an employee and be really dissatisfied with your situation.
Mm-hmm.
at the shop. I mean, you see ways that it could be run better, and I think in the past that meant a lot of skilled mechanics left the bike industry, or they opened up their own store, and maybe they were not cut out to be business owners per se. Maybe they really were just good mechanics, so potentially this is an option to go into a business, do the mechanical work that you're really skilled for, and not necessarily have to deal with some of the hassles of working in a bike shop that you might want to see things done differently if it were yours.
Mm-hmm. So business is a competitive environment, but in case of Velotooler and Velotooler mechanic, do you see that some form of a collaboration between shops? Just for example, there's a really good mechanic in the area, and you kind of have, neither of you can really afford to hire him because obviously this mechanic will probably require like a higher rate.
Yeah.
But then sharing him and giving him opportunity to make more through those like scheduled work. Like you can provide him a higher a pay on Friday, and this another bike shop can actually do it on Wednesday, and you guys can just basically figure out a little bit of a schedule and have pay more, but you also obviously can get more out of it. Do you see that type of collaboration between shops? So there's a territory, is this a real rivalry? Like for example, here in Westerly, how does it?
I think there are a lot of shops that are competitive with their local competition. There's another local shop that they've decided that that's where their biggest losses and income are coming from sales to the other place. But me personally, that's not an issue. It might not work for some shops, but for me, I don't really care. And my personal history is that I worked at two competing or local shops at the same time. They both knew I wasn't moonlighting. I worked at both stores. I went to the store, I did the work, I went home. I went to the other store, I did the work, I went home. I'm just a mechanic at that time. I'm there to do the work. The rest of the business, I wasn't really that concerned with. That's the business owner's thing. They need work done, I'm there to do it.
So you kind of did it in the past, like you've been shared.
I've done it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done it and been a shared employee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there was a formal agreement between the two shops. They both knew what was happening. But at the time, as my own self-interest as an employee, what I wanted to have consistent work year-round, and we're in a very seasonal area. So if I could, say, be at one shop a couple days a week and be at the other shop a couple days a week, I could have a sufficient schedule 52 weeks a year. If I had chosen to be a full-time employee at one of those shops, I would be overutilized in parts of the year, say the summer, and then be laid off and have maybe no work at all during the deep parts of the winter around here. So that does not make for a good pay.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I also, we've talked about it before, but about the future of the bike shops, and there's obviously a lot of people who disagree with your way of doing things, but you've been, for the past, 2-3 years, kind of mostly like a one-man shop. You've been doing repairs, obviously, you've been hiring people on demand to help you with repairs, but what's your vision in terms of why this model works for you? Is it because of location, or you just see in the future things be changing?
Part of it's location. Obviously I'm up in New England. I'm in Rhode Island on the coast. We have a significant increase in population during the summertime because people have beach houses here. But I don't make a lot of money from that core group of people, so I don't concentrate on them too much. So there's no way to have an employee that you could have year-round and keep them when business slows down. So that's part of the factor. It is the location, but I also see the business itself changing as more and more customers make the choice to purchase through other channels, whether it be the internet or, a mail order business that they're used to dealing with, or a bike shop in another country. There's a lot of avenues. And what that's made very difficult for the shop is there's simply not enough profit left to have a skilled mechanic just available when it suits the customer. That model isn't working, at least in my area. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. And I'm looking for a solution for that. I mean, and my feeling is Velotooler is the way for me to solve that. So that's how I'm using it.
So, even one solution I will have noticed at your yard, in the front yard, there was a sign saying not serving any new customers, which means kind of like contradict what you just said. I mean, obviously, if there's a customer, so there's enough customers, so I'll be happy to take them. But at the same time, you're saying no to the new customers, and why is that?
A big part of the business model is service. It's been very stressed in the industry that we want to give good service, and this also includes mechanical service. And what's happened is that without the profit from the sales of things like clothing or components and bicycles and things like that, there's not enough money to hire the people. Basically the people to actually deliver that service. So margins over time have declined. And so for me, in order to give good service during peak season for my customers that are committed to buying from me, basically my model is buying is belonging. If you want to buy at other places, that's fine. It's not a problem, But at the same time, it also doesn't allow me as a business to provide the service that is also required by those same people. And at some point, I have to decide who are my best customers. And I'm going to service that group of people, and I'm going to want to do it well. And if that means turning down some customers, especially during the peak season, then that's a compromise that I'm happy to make.
Do you think, because we had a chance to go over your financial as well, and when we look at the balance sheet and just basically where the margin you're getting from each customer, and turned out that 80% of your profit comes from like this very specific group of people, as you just said. So like about 100 clients of yours, and the rest 20% is like what belongs to another 4,000.
Yeah.
So you just basically, by putting this shoulder saying no serving another customer, you hypothetically say to those 20% of those 4,000 people, say, well, I'm busy because I'm just focusing on servicing 80% of my of the clients, and they happen to be like kind of like more of less of the group, right?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of consumer behavior, in society has directed the average person to do a lot of research and feel that paying the minimum amount for what is considered a commodity, a bike, or clothing or the parts is all considered a commodity at this point, and the only thing we really have left is service in terms of what a bike shop can offer that can't be delivered by the internet. I mean, they always say, the internet can't hammer a nail or adjust your derailleur, but maybe the internet can get somebody to go to your place and do that. So, I mean, that's where, for me, Velotooler fits in. And within my own business, it's kind of the same thing. That's what we can do. I mean, we can fix the bike, we can teach you how to ride the bike, but it takes people to do those things. And if you want to pay the lowest possible price, a lot of times the person gets eliminated out of that equation. And a lot of people come in and they have an expectation, because, I mean, basically it's been built in as an expectation from the customer's point of view that a bicycle shop will repair their bike. But the other choices that they've made have made that very difficult. At least in my particular area. I mean, I'm sure there's places where this is not true, but in my particular area, that's been harder and harder to actually deliver on that expectation that the customers had. So I look at my best customers, the ones that are committed to buying here, and those people's expectations are the ones that I'm trying to meet. Not necessarily just the masses of people that are out there that happen to have a bike, that happen to come in town, and they need it. And then, I mean, there's other places that I'm referring to.
Mm-hmm.
If there were more Velotoolers mechanics locally, I would either use them in my own store, or I would have the customers, contact those mechanics and send some of that work away. I mean,
And you'd be totally okay with that, because to some shops would be like, well, I don't want to give
they would never do that.
They wouldn't. So
They would never do. I mean, there's a lot of shops would never ever make that choice, and I understand. I mean, in those shops, a lot of them, the general thought is, I will take and accept in all work offered to me, and then I will try to figure out how to deliver it, how to have enough people. So that's led to a cycle where you find a number of very inexperienced staff working in shops at low pay, and then high turnover. Though that same staff gets laid off seasonally, and they never really develop as strong employees for the shop. They never develop the skill set needed to perform a higher level of service that the customer is actually asking for. If you talk to most customers, at least the ones that come into my store, they're very disappointed with their interactions when it comes to retail environments. Whether they go into a store, they go to buy something, and the employee doesn't know anything about the product, and they know more than the employee, and it's really changed how customers start to view the business that they go into. I mean, there's a lack of trust. The industry can't build trust by going with that same plan. The industry will probably be smaller. There will probably be fewer shops. There will probably be more mobile mechanics. There will be more Velotooler mechanics that will come to a customer's house, because a lot of those customers are not profitable for a traditional brick and mortar shop. So I'm not trying to convert those customers.
And interesting. And in the past, you've been saying that ideal bike shop of a future, maybe it's already happening. It's just something that is just represent a showroom where you have not just necessarily carrying 1, 2, 3 brands, you're carrying everything. And you have a little bit of a sample, but then you go to your computer and say, well, that's what we have. We have something from Kanaga, from Canada, from Specialized, and you just say, you selling your expertise, and you're asking people, what do you want? And I can talk about the bike you want, and maybe you can refer them to purchase, and then a bike company can just basically give you a portion of that sale, and you can just act as a person on the floor selling things, but at the same time not dealing with the inventory and not dealing with the brands directly, and trying to meet the expectation. You're basically saying, well, I mean, I can sell you anything, but I'm an expert, so I can actually direct you to the right model, direct the brand or anything you like. So do you think that, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think what's happening is a traditional kind of bike shop manufacturer relationship is, the bike shop is shown a product line by the brand. They make like a decision on what they think will sell in their market. They do a large order. They receive the order. They assemble those bikes. They try to sell them to their customers. And if they have leftover inventory, they try to find some way to sell it, usually involving a large discount, and those products are moved out the door. I've been into a number of shops during the off season to see every bike in the store 20 to 30% off, which means that every shop is losing money on all those bikes. Me personally, I am looking for a different model. I'd rather take a lower share of the revenue from a bike sale and have a guaranteed sale, than have a higher potential markup, but then not necessarily realize that same markup, due to old stock and things like that. And it all kind of works together in my mind. Basically the customer comes in, we sell them the bike that they want, we get it in, we do the assembly, we do the fitting, we teach them anything they need to know about how to operate the bike, little things from showing somebody how to take the front wheel off so they can put the bike in their car, on their own bike. You know, I did it for a woman yesterday, and she didn't know how to take the bike off her wheel off the bike. She didn't know how to open up the brake. It was an old cantilever style brake, and she was very unsure of it, and that keeps her from using her bike and riding it. That stops her. So the internet is not going to come in and, you know, put that particular wheel, that brake. And a lot of customers need direct instruction. A general, like video on YouTube is excellent for a lot of things, but for a customer with a really low level of knowledge, the slightest change in the bike, like even just a different brake or a different color, is enough to throw them off so that they can't actually do it. You know, a mechanic, you know, they're really can be underappreciated as far as what it is they can do. I mean, you might give them 10 different bikes with 10 different brakes and different quick releases and through axles and bolt-on wheels, and they can take all of them off and put them all back on. But that doesn't mean my customers can. They have to be taught individually. So that's what I do.
Interesting. So you rather take a smaller portion of the sale and just basically have a guaranteed sale, and then still make money of this, and then spend those money on your time, like talking to the customer. Just basically, no, if you start buying more and then start losing money on particular brands or your inventory, that means that you don't really have this extra time and money to actually spend with the customer. Is that the point? Or
yeah, that's the point. I mean, it's, you know, I think every shop is under a lot of pressure to sell inventory that they've purchased, you know, and there's a lot of really good business reasons that would say, you know, if you purchase this inventory, that you need to sell it. It's pretty obvious. I mean, if you don't do that, you run into problems. So, but that's led to a lot of poor selling decisions on the shop's part, you know. I mean, they'll sell bikes that are maybe don't fit the customer, you know. I mean, that's incredibly common. You know, and sometimes
you've been forced to sell it.
You're forced to sell it.
Really, and then at the same time, you don't really act anymore as an expert because you're just struggling because you have all the inventory that you have to get rid of in order to stay in business, which is...
And I want to change that. You know, I want to change that idea that, you know, we are struggling to pay inventory and we make a lot of choices that are bad choices in the long run. In the short term, they're really good business decisions. In the long run, you know, the woman I was dealing with, you know, yesterday, I mean, she was not a very tall woman. The bike was much too large. And, you know, her options, I mean, a lot of things are stopping her from riding. She didn't know how to get the wheel off the bike so it would fit into her car so that she could transport it so she'd go to the bike path and ride. The bike was too large.
But so, how did you ask how did she purchase that bike?
She was basically, somebody helped her with the sale, you know, originally, you know.
Okay. So there was a bike shop.
There was a bike shop, yeah. There was a bike shop involved. I didn't ask, you know, which shop it was. And, you know, it's not, honestly, it's not my concern. I mean, that part I'm not too worried about. The shop's too big, and I'm just trying to come up with a solution, and her budget's very low, to the point where she can't afford to buy, like, anything a shop would normally sell. So, I mean, she's looking for bikes that are definitely below $200, and so probably the used market. So she's a candidate for that, but I don't know when those bikes are going to come in. So I'm just trying to get her out there, keep her riding, and then, you know, try to convert her into a good customer when I'm able to, you know, get a product that works for her budget.
Right, and then slowly and shortly just kind of generate a profit because of that particular customers. Because I assume, I mean, and maybe between you and me, we mentioned that many times, is like for the bike shop, selling something that is below $500 is really difficult to actually I think it's a difficult business decision, right? Maybe if you live in a very, very urban area where there's a lot of like students or commuters, and probably that sounds like a good idea. But at the same time, you run into a space and a retail space where you have to rent and have to pay a premium for that. So, and still, like, can you tell me more about like how much do you make if you sell something that is 500? Like in terms of, because obviously there's a high expectation from the customer by providing like a free tune-up, annual tune-ups, and that's what bike shops been doing for the past couple of years, like providing free services. But if you sell something that is $500 or less than that, how much do you actually make, and what's the risk of actually losing money of that sale?
Well, I mean, it depends. I mean, it depends on the volume of the shop. So if you have somebody that's in a high volume area, buying and selling bikes that are in the $500 price range can be very profitable. The companies are things like, shipping costs are, can go way down to the point where you get free shipping because your volume is high enough. The other thing that happens is obviously your markup increases. So because your volume is higher, you're paying a little less than a shop that doesn't have that volume. Or if you're like me and you're in a smaller town, we have an existing store that's been in the town for a long time and essentially sells almost all of the bikes in that particular price range that are sold around here. And so for me to get involved with that particular end of the market is incredibly unprofitable. So, if a $500 bike, at the end of the day, let's say I make $100 on it, after I've, paid for the bike itself, shipping costs involved, assembly time for whoever, whether it's me or the mechanic that comes in, the time it takes to sell the customer the particular bike, and then to deal with, the typical break-in adjustments, the free service offered with it. And then also on top of that, if there is a warranty-related issue, if I still want to continue to give service to this customer, most customers, the expectation with warranty is free. Just like we're offering the free adjustments, if there happens to be a defect in the bike, the assumption on the customer's part is it is free. If there's not enough profit built into the initial sale, the pressure on the shop is to add a labor charge onto that warranty-related work, which the way dealer agreements work is perfectly acceptable, but not to the customer, which ultimately is the person that the shop really cares about, because they're the one that's actually paying them. So, if you want to offer good service on the end, you really got to think about that.
So basically, potentially thinking about getting $100 profit out of like selling $500 bike, you can actually run into loss if something happens, or like some person will come back for free adjustments, and then you still have to pay mechanics.
Still paying the mechanic.
The $100 really shrinks really fast.
Yeah, and I think that's something to understand. With a lot of with selling bikes in general, is that they do need service. I mean, you don't just sell the bike and it goes out the door. That does happen an awful lot. I mean, it is true that most customers will not necessarily take advantage of the free service offered, but that may be because they're not actually using the bike. And then when I look at that customer, in the big scheme of things, they don't spend a lot of money. They might, in other words, you might sell them the bike and not see them again. So you made $100, and there's no additional sales. And I think a lot of sales training would tell you that add-on sales, down the line are really where you make your money. We make our money on accessories, not necessarily on bike sales. It's just more margin. So, and the same thing with service and repair work. So, when I'm selling a bike that's $500, I really want the customer to have a good experience, and I want them to ride more. So I want to be able to give them service. I have to make the money up front so that I can give them the service that they expect in the future.
So just to wrap it up, that basically $500 bike is not, it doesn't, if you sell, there's basically the mark, there's a mark where you actually can really make money off the $500 bike. If you sell enough, that's great. If you can't really sell enough, that's kind of where like a puzzle comes along, like where you sometimes don't really realize that you're actually losing money on selling something.
Yeah, and I think, as the average customer has become much, much more comfortable with making those larger purchases of what seems like a complex item to buy from a website. And the bike shows up at their house and it's in a box.
But at the same time, if somebody buys anything on Amazon and some other Walmart, for example, and they pay $300-400, even less, and they get bike shipped, but then they call you, and you've told me that's been happening, many times, like where people are looking for a bike assembly. So they come to you, and you charge them $80-100 for a bike assembly, and which, on a customer perspective, it's totally acceptable, right?
It's totally acceptable.
So at the same time, when somebody buys actually online, I think it's easy for you because you don't really have to provide them with this free service because this bike hasn't been bought from you. So like when they come something that is less than come in to the store that they bought and it costs them less than $500, I mean literally, and then you're selling them a bike assembly for $100, that you just really take the $100 and put it in your pocket. There's no risk of running into something else, like providing them free service. So
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think potentially the real profit for a shop on more or less entry level bikes, which in today's day and age, I mean, most bike shops are going to start. Bike shop bikes are going to start over $400. It's really wrapped up in the service, the skilled part of the job, and if you don't have to do that for free anymore, then you can make more money.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it, for me. I mean, I have those bills to pay, and, giving it up, for free is not very appealing to me.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay, well, thank you so much, Amos, and I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks so much for consulting Velotooler and using it.
Yeah, thank you.